Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Meg Grigal. I work at the Institute for Community Inclusion at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, where I am the director of Think College. And today I'm going to be sharing inclusive post-secondary education, building better futures for students with intellectual disability. I look forward to sharing some information with you and hearing your questions afterward. So, just a little bit of background on what Think College is. We are a center that does national technical assistance and training, research, and evaluation. And all of our work is dedicated to supporting the inclusion of people with intellectual disability in higher education. So, our website is www.thinkcollege.net. And we have multiple projects that we do our work through, and I'll be telling you a little bit more about those in the near future. But before we get too far into inclusive higher education and the work of Think College, just want to set the stage with some conversation about what college is and what it does for all individuals. So, the college experience is really transformational. In the United States, students typically go to college after the age of 18. They will often go for 2 to 4 years. They might pursue a degree, they might pursue a certificate or a credential in an industry. But aside from those types of outcomes, college produces a huge change in a person's life. They meet new friends, they build some new networks, they're exposed to content that perhaps they didn't see or hear about in college, in high school. Um, they're exposed to different people from different places, and this often leads people to have better understanding of concepts and perceptions that they've just never had to deal with before. You also have the opportunity to build some independence in college that sometimes doesn't happen when you're living at home with your parents. You also have the opportunity to fail, and sometimes you learn more from those failures than you do from the successes. So, college is a transformational experience for most people. And my guess is if you're a part of this conference, you likely had a college experience and some of these things are resonating with you. So when you come out of college, obviously you want to have a career, but you also ideally leave with friends that are going to take you into the next part of your life. You're going to have experience both in terms of navigating social situations, navigating employment situations, learning how to balance your schedule. Ideally, you come out of college with a different sense of maturity and confidence and knowing a little more about who you are and who you want to be. And when you leave college, you know more about the opportunities you have and how to access them. Finally, and these are really important, college offers people the chance to learn not only how to fail, but how to handle failure. What do you do when something is too hard and you didn't hit the mark you wanted to? How do you ask for help? What works and doesn't work for you in terms of being a learner, in terms of being a worker? Um, what you need to be successful. What do you need to ensure that you can manage your time or meet your responsibilities? It also allows you to learn how to access desired knowledge. And that's something that will help you even after college. Knowing how and where to get access to information as an adult learner is a critical step. You also learn how to balance your life and your schedule. And you have some idea, I hope, when you leave college of where you're going to go next. So these are very important outcomes. So when you were growing up, I just want you to think for a moment how many of you were told that college was an option for you from the get-go, from the time you were young until you were in middle or high school, that people expected you to go to college? How many of you were encouraged to go to college by a teacher, somebody who took special interest in you and saw that you had the potential to go and be successful in college? How many of you were encouraged to go to college by your family member because they thought that could help you achieve some of the goals you've talked about? So I hope the answer to all three of these questions was yes, that people in your life thought about college for you and encouraged you to go. But for people with intellectual disability, often that is not the case. Often they are not supported to think about a college future, which makes it seem almost unachievable. So I'm going to share, pardon me, I'm going to share briefly a little video by a student named Nolan who talks about what it feels like to not be encouraged to go to college.
When I was younger, I was never told to think about college. No one really thought that I could go to college, but I still wanted to go to college, like my brother. So I told my family that I wanted to go to college. It wasn't easy, and it took a lot of work, but I made it. I'm a student at Mass Bay Community College. Make your dreams come true and think college.
I will say I absolutely love Nolan's enthusiasm, but I also know too many students have that same experience in high school that no one told them they should think about going to college. And part of the work that we do at Think College is we recognize you need to have the expectation for college, and then you need to have the opportunities. So, for the next few minutes, I'm going to be talking about the opportunities that have now been developed in the United States for people with intellectual disability to see themselves as having a college future. So this chart shares sort of the growth of colleges and universities over the past 20 years in the US that are enrolling students with intellectual disability. The first survey we did back in 2004, we were able only to identify just a small handful of programs. We did another national survey in 2009 and were able to locate 149 programs. And since then, you can see with each of the markers that it has grown. This chart says 339, and on the next slide, you're going to find out it's just slightly more than that. But higher education opportunities in the United States have grown substantially over the past 20 years. So this map represents the current opportunities in the US by state. So each of these numbers represents a college or a university that are enrolling people with intellectual disability. And you could see as of the 17th of September, which is just 10 days ago, there were 343 programs in the United States. So this has given us more opportunity. Now, will I say it's sufficient? No, I don't think it is sufficient. There are over 5,000 colleges and universities in the United States, and this represents maybe 6%. So we really have a long way to go to make sure that the same college options are available to people with intellectual disability that are available to people without intellectual disability. But it is a good start. So the thing that changed these opportunities substantially in the United States was a law that was passed in 2008 called the Higher Education Opportunities Act. This law mentioned people with intellectual disabilities specifically, and it created three really important factors. It created a new model demonstration project, which is a grant-funded program to support the development of innovative programs at colleges and universities. It created a new type of college program that would allow students with intellectual disability have access to financial aid. This type of program is called a comprehensive transition program. And these CTPs is a new way for federal student aid to be given to people who previously would not have been able to access it. So the Higher Ed Act created an alternative pathway for people with intellectual disability to legitimately be enrolled and receive financial aid in higher education institutions. And then out of those two things, we have all these students that could potentially go to college, but the systems and universities that were implementing them needed support. So this law also funded a national coordinating center to provide technical assistance and training to collect data from these programs and to evaluate the program. Think College has served as the National Coordinating Center for the TIPSID program since its inception in 2010. So that allowed us to gather data on these programs and students for the past 14 years. And then finally, it supported the development of accreditation standards, which have now come a long way. We actually have a new accreditor in the United States that has accredited some programs, and I believe that'll be a further growth in the field. But this is really what got us started back in 2008. And the programs that are supported by the Higher Education Opportunities Act allow students with intellectual disability to enroll in college courses, both for credit and audit. It supports them to earn credentials. It supports them to work in paid jobs on and off campus. It supports them to participate in community life and in sometimes to learn to live independently if the program or the college or university has residential services. So this is the picture of college life that should sound pretty familiar because these are the same things that people without intellectual disability do when they go to college. This is the same picture we're painting. So there are some differences with inclusive higher education. It's a very student-centered approach in the United States. The federally funded programs are required to do person-centered planning. So really thinking about what are the students' goals, what are they trying to achieve, and then aligning their career pathway or their course pathway to those goals. There are alternate admission standards in most of these college programs. So the application to get in might look different. There might be an interview, there might be a family visit. There's more conversation about making the right match so that a student that comes to a program is going to get what they think they're going to get and that it's going to meet their needs and that they're ready for the opportunities this program allows to them. There's varying levels of course access in these programs. In some programs, there's students can access many, if not most, of the same courses that their peers with other and no disabilities can access. In other places, sometimes there are more specialized curricula where students are receiving their education alongside only other students with intellectual disability. Most programs offer non-degree credentials. In some cases, students have attained a 2 or a 4-year degree, an associate's or a bachelor's degree, but I would say that's still somewhat more rare. But the credentials they're getting are the same credentials in many cases that other peers that are not degree-seeking students are getting. And in some cases, they are specialized credentials that are associated specifically with their program. There are housing opportunities or residential experiences depending on the campus and what they have for everybody else. Our goal at Think College is to really ensure that students with intellectual disability have access to the same experiences that students without intellectual disability have. And more programs are beginning to offer inclusive housing options for students with intellectual disability. And then finally, depending on their status, some financial aid might be available. Again, going back to that CTP application, if a program has been approved to offer comprehensive transition post-secondary program, they can offer financial aid to eligible students who have intellectual disability. I want to differentiate between what these programs are, and I think I've described a pretty comprehensive picture that I hope looks very much like what many other college experiences are that you've heard of or experienced yourself. But what these programs are not are just special ed programs located on a college campus. You don't want to pick up an existing special ed program and plunk it on a campus and keep it in a little bubble. The campus is the curriculum. It is not just about creating specialized instruction in a different location. It's not just about life skills instruction. It's the life skills are navigating the campus, using your mobile device to communicate with friends, using your mobile device to monitor a syllabus and know what you need to do. And it's not simply a vocational training program. Employment is a critical element in these programs, and career awareness and exploration, and job tryouts and internships are all part and parcel of what inclusive higher education offers students. And in many cases, students with intellectual disability have paid jobs while they are enrolled and taking classes. But it's not solely a vocational training program. The added element of inclusive academics, community membership, living on campus, all of these things are really critical parts of inclusive higher education and its impact on these students' lives. So, as I mentioned, when we talked about Nolan, there were two things you need to make a change. One is opportunities, and you can see that we've grown in the capacity of providing opportunities for students. The other thing you really need is expectation. Someone has to believe that you should go to college. And the power of expectations is really important. It's not a nebulous thing, it's actually quite um, foundational. So, this is a finding from a study by Dorengow and Lindstrom from 2012. And they found that the parent expectations about graduating with a diploma, getting a paid job, or attending post-secondary education was associated with the student outcomes reflecting those expectations. So if parents did expect their child to go to school or get a job, they were more likely to go to school and get a job. And I know it seems almost like begging the question, but the reality is, if nobody expects something from you, you're not going to be given the opportunities to even go be on the right pathway to access it. So here's some other findings that we need to keep in mind as we're exploring the idea of supporting people with intellectual disability to go to college. So Lipscomb et al. In 2017 found that youth with disabilities were significantly less likely to expect to obtain post-secondary education than youth without disabilities. This kind of finding has been around for a very long time. Unfortunately, I believe it's still true that very fewer people with disabilities think they're going to go to college. But then the other finding is parents of youth with disability also have lower expectations for post-secondary ed for their children than parents of students without disability. So how do we counter that? How do we help parents change those expectations, which obviously manifest in the actual outcome of a student going to or not going to college? Um, I think the change agent is information and helping parents know it is possible and supporting them to find the resources to help make it happen. So I think this is a more hopeful statistic. My colleague Claire Papay, in a study she did in 2011, found that youth with intellectual and developmental disability whose parents did expect they would be employed, so have a job, were 28 times more likely to enroll in post-secondary education after leaving high school than parents who did not expect employment. So those high expectations of, I believe in you, I think you could go to school, I think you could get a job, those expectations result in behavioral change. They result in accessing services and opportunities that will lead toward those outcomes. So I think we have to really focus on expectations. Um, Now, sometimes I have heard this, and I've heard this more times than I can count from parents, from teachers. College sounds great. That sounds awesome, Meg, but you're not talking about my kids. My kids are. And then I might hear a disability label. Then I might hear a term like low functioning or some other descriptor that is really more descriptive of those people's expectations for that child than their actual abilities. So I am talking about people with intellectual disability, people who have Down syndrome, people who have autism and an intellectual disability. Um, so I think too often people discount some of these options because they've never seen it. So I'm here to break the myth. Intellectual disability, here's the myth. Intellectual disability prevents students from accessing higher education. It's not true. I think what impacts people's lack of access to higher education is the expectations. So student access to higher ed is impacted by their family's expectations. I just shared with you 3 studies that document how clear that is. Well, what are family expectations influenced by? They're influenced by the professionals who give them their guidance and their knowledge and their expectations. The teacher is going to say, well, based on my experience, my credentials, and the things that I see, this is what is possible for your student. So all of these, the guidance, the knowledge, and expectations of professionals are all influenced by their past experience. Well, if they have never seen a college or a student with intellectual disability go to college, they're not going to say, I believe your student can go to college. So where do students end up? Too often in outcomes that we are not looking for. They're in sheltered workshops, making sub-minimum wage, doing piecemeal work. They're living in poverty. They're unemployed. They're sitting on their parents' couch, or they're going to a day habilitation center doing art activities or some other kind of activity that has nothing to do with their personal goals or achieving an independent life. So that's not what we want to create. And I think too often, when faced with those options, parents' hopes vanish if they're confronted with insufficient information and seemingly impossible barriers for their child's matriculation into college. That's from a study from Martinez Conroy and Soretto in 2012. And I do believe that is still the case today. There are oftentimes I will speak to parents and I'll share the resources Think College has, and they'll say, no one told me this was possible. No one ever brought this up during an IEP meeting or told me, or they told me I was being unrealistic. So I think it's important for us to consider how critical those parent expectations are and how critical the professional knowledge is in creating a college trajectory for people with intellectual disability. And I think it's also important to check our own biases, because if you've never seen it and it's really hard to know, then what do you believe when you talk to a student about higher education and the potential of a college student with intellectual disability to succeed? So I think sometimes we have to have an internal conversation with ourselves and say, well, maybe some of them could. I guess I don't know. It really depends on the student. So thinking about how much your own personal experience, your knowledge of what's possible, and your belief in creating new pathways is going to influence this student's ability to go to college. So this isn't quoting anybody but me, but I firmly believe this after working in this field for 25 years. Your beliefs and expectations are going to have a greater impact on a student going to college than that student's skills or their disability, because your beliefs and expectations are going to give them access to resources, experiences, access to other professionals. Um, so it's not their disability that is always the key factor in whether or not they can or should go to college. It's the people surrounding them and their knowledge and experience. So as part of our work, we are looking to build professional capacity. So one of the first things I say to professionals, either in special education or higher education, is, do you know the current college options for people with intellectual disability? Have you seen them? Have you visited them? Do you know anything about them? Do you share that information with parents and students in a meaningful way? Do you help them understand what's possible? Do you send them to a website of a program that you believe is good or potentially an option for the student? And are students and families included in your school system or in your university when you have a college fair? Are you including people with intellectual disability in those experiences so they can learn about the options that are available to them, either in your location or in your region? In some places in the United States, there are very, very few programs, and in other parts of the United States, there are many. So we've had many parents who call us and say, well, there's nothing in my state, but I'm looking 2 states over. So knowing what's available, or at least knowing where to find that information, I think is a critical skill as a professional. So if you are saying to yourself, and I don't know if you are, but if you are saying, how can I improve my knowledge of what's possible? Um, I think, I hope that that's when you come to us. That's when you say, well, who might know the answer of what's out there? So you could come to Think College and at least get a starter kit of information. So we have 2 national centers that I will briefly describe. One is the Think College National Coordinating Center. This is the center I mentioned earlier that was funded in 2010 as part of the funding that came from the Higher Education Opportunities Act. And we work with the model demonstration projects that were funded by the Office of Post-Secondary Education. They are called, oh, it's a long name. It's called Transition and Post-Secondary Education Programs for Students with Intellectual Disability. And the acronym is TIPSID. Um, and the TIPSID grantees were funded in 2010. There were a limited number of grants funded for 5 years. A different cohort of grantees were funded again in 2015, and a different cohort was again funded in 2020. So there's been 3 rounds of funding. They've funded up to 27 programs. I think right now there's 22 grantees. Um, and we work with all of them to provide them technical assistance to support their training needs. We also collect data from every program, and I'll share some of those data with you in a little bit. We also do technical assistance for anybody else around the country. So we have a help desk that people email us from all over the world, asking for information, resources, and references to certain programs. We have a searchable directory on our website of every college program in the United States that enrolls people with intellectual disability that is free and searchable. We have multiple other types of resources that I think have helped create new knowledge and sometimes new program options. Our other center is the Inclusive Higher Education Network. This was funded in 2021. We've just been extended to have an additional year of funding. So this project will end September of 2025, and we hope it gets to continue some past that. But that project is really taking all the information we've learned from working with the TIPSIDs over the past 14 years and bringing it to everyone else. So as part of this project, we've developed a public awareness campaign. We've built state and regional alliances. We've delved into some of the gaps in inclusive higher education, working with career and technical education programs and working with vocational rehabilitation. And then we're also looking at developing multiple kinds of training that are free and available to the public, and launching a membership organization. So you can see we have sort of a broad scope of work. Both of these things tie together, and many of my staff work on both of these projects. So in terms of building your understanding of what does this really look like in real life, one thing that I think that could be helpful is looking at some of the research. I also believe that the data allow people to say, well, that sounds nice, but can you prove it really works? I have heard that since the late 90s when I started working in this field. And at the time, it was a good idea without a lot of data to back it up. And now, so many years later, we have data on 5,000 plus college students with intellectual disability on every course they take, every job they have, and their outcomes. So it is a beautiful thing to look at these reports and these data and get a sense of where, what does it mean to you, and what piece of that information could you take back and do something with? Um, so much of what we've learned, as I mentioned earlier, the program that was funded originally in 2010, the TIPSID program, the Transition and Post-Secondary Education Program for Students with Intellectual Disability, is a grant-funded program through the Department of Ed. And the goal of it is to create, expand, or enhance high-quality, inclusive higher education to support positive outcomes for individuals with intellectual disability. And this program has really allowed thousands of students to have access to higher ed for whom they might not have had it if it were not for the TIPSID program. In many cases, it was the first program funded in a state, and subsequently other programs were developed. Since 2010, the TIPSID grants have supported 126 colleges and universities to advance higher education for students with intellectual disability. These colleges and universities have been funded in 34 of the 50 states in the United States. So approximately a third of the higher ed programs that are currently enrolling people with ID have had TIPSID funding at one time or another. So they haven't funded every program in the country, but they've funded a substantial portion of them. This current year, this past year, we just published our annual report for the past year. These are where the programs are located. There are 22 grantees that are implementing 41 programs. 39 of those are enrolling students, and 2 are in a planning year at 39 colleges across 16 states. So all of this information is on our website. So if this seems a little quick, or you wanted to go back and look at a specific state or program, all of this information is available, and I'll make sure that this slide deck is also available to your conference planners. So just to give you a sense of how impactful post-secondary education can be on employment, this graph, I apologize, it's a little bit small, but it shows the 3 cohorts of the TIPSID grantees. And the top line, the blue line, shows the students who had jobs when they left the program. And You can see they started off relatively low, 16%. It went up to 22, then 23%. By the end of cohort one, 40% of the students when they left the program were employed. The following cohort, you can see that trajectory continues to climb to 52%. It did drop significantly in 2020. It is no coincidence that that's also the year that COVID-19 shut down our country and many, many people's jobs, livelihoods, and college experiences were disrupted significantly. So unfortunately, that also impacted the students enrolled in these college programs. And then in cohort three, you can still see that the paid employment at exit, while it's gone down a tiny bit, it's still over 40%. The comparison group at the bottom are the adults served by state intellectual and developmental disability agencies. So these are adult service providers. And the level of employment you can see is almost completely flat. 16%, 19, it never gets over 19%. The past 2 years was 15 and 16%. So that's the typical outcome for an adult with an intellectual disability. And that's really horrifying. And I don't know what the stats are for the employment rate of people with intellectual disability in your communities, but I suggest you look at it and think, is that what we really want? Is that what we expect? Um, because the comparison here, I think, is very important. So paid employment after exit. So we also collect data on students and their experiences once they've left college. And our most recent data, again, this report just came out, it's from last year's academic year. 1 year after exit, 59% of students had a paid job. 2 years after exit, 66% of students had a paid job. And 3 years after exit, 67% of students had a paid job. This is wonderful. Not only is the number going up, but it also shows that there's some longevity to these jobs. It's not, I just had a job when I left, but then I lost that job and didn't maintain employment. This doesn't mean they had the same job they had when they left. I hope they didn't. Um, and I know the respondents dwindle. That's just the nature of follow-up data. It gets harder and harder to get people to answer surveys after they've left the program. But I think it's important to note that the long-term impact of these programs is paid employment. And because looking at the comparison of what the typical adult with intellectual and developmental disabilities, they only have at most a 19% chance of having a job. Whereas if they go to college, they are much more likely to have a job after they exit. So in the 12 years of the TIPSID data, this is not including the last year and a half of data, 3,675 paid jobs students held while they were in the program, almost 60,000 course enrollments, and of those enrollments, 26,000 were in typical inclusive courses, and over 2,100 students who completed their programs and earned credentials. So this is a huge win, I think, for our country, and it's a huge example of what, when given the expectation and the opportunity, what people with intellectual disability are capable of. And that's why I love the use of data, because it actually documents it's not just a good idea, it actually produces outcomes. So if you're interested in getting this report, I'm just going to pause for a second. You can use your phone or your camera app to scan this QR code, and you can download our most recent report. There's the full report, there's an executive summary, and a highlights document. Any or all of those are free and accessible through our website, and I hope you can take a moment to read them. I think they will open your mind to some of the possibilities that we've seen here. So I want to just also drop a few seeds about other opportunities through our Think College work through both of our centers. We do virtual technical assistance. So we have an online help desk. If you send an email to thinkcollegeta@umb.edu, it'll go into our technical assistance system. It'll be assigned to the person who is most appropriate to answer that question. We provide technical assistance to literally thousands of people each year. And we keep track of those questions so we can develop resources in response to them. We also have webinars. We have resources by topic page. So if there's a specific topic you're interested in, program development, academic access, employment, We created pages for each of these that have our best and most curated resources. We have a resource library that has thousands of documents on it. And then we have online modules for training. So please feel free to check it out at thinkcollege.net. Here's our resource library. It is again searchable by date, by author, by topic. So these are all free and downloadable resources related to academic access, campus membership, policy and legislation, program planning, student supports. So I hope these resources are useful to you. We also have a specific page for students, and in this case, we generally mean students with intellectual disability. There's resources related to college searching and advocacy, and some student stories that sometimes it helps students to believe that it's possible by reading other students' stories. So please take a look at those. And then we have a families page that's dedicated to answering families' questions about cost and accessibility and how do you do a college search and where do you start. We also have a families Facebook page where families guide and respond to and support other families. So if you have interest in any of these things, just let us know, or obviously you can go to the website and check it out. And then finally, a resource that I want to make sure you know you have access to is it answers this expectations piece, and it also helps people understand not only is it possible, but what it looks like when it's done well. So I think one of the things we have been challenged by in the United States is how do you build awareness and expectation if you don't have something in your backyard? How do you gain knowledge and share it if you have no experience? And how do you move people toward that goalpost if they don't really know what you're describing as real? So, as I mentioned earlier, our Think College Inclusive Higher Education Network project created a public awareness campaign, and with that, a new website called thinkhighered.net. It's a project of Think College, and the video documents multiple students. We went around and filmed. It's a documentary, filmed students all over the United States, as well as some of the leaders in their college, talking about what they wanted, why it matters. And my hope is that when you watch this video, you will think, oh my goodness, well, number one, it's wonderful to see these students thriving. But number two, how could I use this video to change expectations, to build opportunities? How could I share this video with my colleagues, with my family, with, my network, my professional network, to help them understand that this is really possible? So with that, I'm going to come to almost the end of my session, and I'm going to share this video with you, and then I will come back and we will wrap up our time together. Sugar, give me 1 second.
Hi everyone, I'm a student here at Georgia Tech. We are asking students with intellectual disabilities around the country what's fun about going to college.
The chance to not be around your parents.
The best thing about being in college is the food, being in a dorm, getting to meet new people.
You have a bed, you have a sink, you have a desk, you have a TV, you have a refrigerator. You can also hang up posters anywhere.
Great mocha latte, the best mocha latte I ever had.
There are more than 420,000 school-age students with intellectual disability, but only 2% of them are likely to attend college after high school.
I wanted to come to KU because of the classes and I wanted to take choir. And also I took American Sign Language.
The classes I'm taking right now are Business Law 1, Intermediate Algebra, and English Composition 2.
It's cool to meet new people. It's fun to chat with the guys and the managers and the coaches. I want to be more independent and to join the sorority as my mom did.
I like to hang out with friends, watch sports, and I joined the Southernmost Coral Restoration Club.
high school, I have to be with a teacher all the time, so it was not like any independent there. I was excited to have like the college life.
There are more than 300 inclusive post-secondary education programs around the country.
Having students with disabilities in classes has compelled our faculty to reflect on their practice. So it actually makes us better teachers, makes us better professors, makes us better scholars and researchers.
It's really got people to realize that we have to focus on universal access and doing things in universal design, everything that we do.
The great thing about including students with intellectual disabilities at KU is actually it makes the entire university a better university. It teaches students to appreciate difference, and it creates a more caring environment because students support each other.
This has united, I think, our campus faculty, staff, and students. They have the opportunity to network and get mentors and other social skills and career development that their peers have had for many years. Now they have.
I want to go into real estate in the future.
My goal is to be a teacher at a preschool.
I would know about running a bed and breakfast.
Political science is one of 3 career goals I have in mind.
My credo is maybe work in the Kansas State Capitol.
I would like to have my own food truck because I want to have pizza, have some burgers, maybe have some tacos, nachos.
College has changed me because it's helped me grow up, like getting a job or living on your own.
It's great, and you have a lot of support when you get here.
If I can do it, you can do it. You know?
It's a time to be serious. It's a time to learn. I have the skills. I have the skills to live on my own one day.
Think higher. Think college for students with intellectual disability. Think access, employment, equity, options, diversity, independence, confidence, friendship. College is possible for students with intellectual disability. Take the first step at thinkhighered.net, a project of Think College.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video as much as we enjoyed making it. And I really do hope you take a moment to go to www.thinkhighered.net and see the resources we have there. You can download the video. We have resource guides. We have audience-specific materials for teachers, for parents, for students. And our whole goal with the public awareness campaign is really to just plant that seed of awareness that it is possible, which will hopefully build expectations and advance opportunities. So I want to thank you right now for your time and your attention and your interest in inclusive higher ed, and for the opportunity to share some information about Think College with you. If you'd like assistance from us or want more information, the email here for Think College is thinkcollegeta@umb.edu. And finally, if you'd like to stay in touch, and we hope you do, sign up for our mailing list. We send out a newsletter once a month. If there's a big new thing, we're going to know about it, and we want you to know about it. So it's a really low-key way for you to kind of stay in the know and build your own network with people who are interested in inclusion in higher education. So take a moment with this QR code and sign up for our mailing list. And with that, I'm going to end our time together. I think if you have questions, I'll be available in the next few minutes to talk about those. And you're always welcome to email me or Think College if you have support needs. So thank you so much, and I appreciate your time and attention.